So am I coming through nice and clear? Can everyone hear me in chat? Are we all good? Can everyone see my screen? Can I get some yes and no's in the chat if we need to? Yeah, cool. Okay. So, as I said a minute ago, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload, with this video, I'm going to also upload the files for the model itself. So what you will receive is, you'll get the Axe Substance Painter file, which is the one that's on screen, not the one I'm going to go through with you guys. There's going to be the actual Axe itself as a model, and then you're going to have 5 of these texture packs. I'm going to show you how to install all this and everything, so it's fine. So, what we're going to do, we're going to go to New. So when you open the program, you're basically going to have a thing that pops up that says, "Ooh, do you want to just start painting?" It's going to give you the meat map model. We don't want that. So what you want to do is you want to go to File, File Select. We're going to go for the Battle Axe. Set your document resolution. I set mine to 2K just because it's nice and fast. Normal map format. Stick with either OpenGL or DirectX. It doesn't really matter. You can change them in game anyway. Compute tangent space per fragment. You can ignore that for the time being. Import cameras. Auto unwrap. Auto unwrap is an experimental option. The model is already unwrapped. It's terribly unwrapped because it's a model I found online, but it is unwrapped and it'll serve the purpose of your game testing. Okay. Click OK. Do I want to save changes? Yes, we'll save the changes to my current one. So it's going to import the model. Okay. So you're going to have this. Now, when you first open Substance Painter, whether you've downloaded the student version or not, you will likely click on the brushes panel and there will be nothing here. Okay, which is kind of annoying because you kind of want some brushes to play with. So what we can do, we're going to go to File, we're going to go to Import Resources, and then Add Resources. And what it's going to do is it's going to take us to, again, you go to whichever file you need to go to. I'm just going to go with, I've got the default brushes already installed. Let's have a look which ones were modified last. These two. So I'm going to install these two, right? You're basically going to install default brushes, converted legacy tool presets, and legacy brushes, because they're that. If you've got any other brushes, whether you download stuff for, Photoshop or anything else, you want to make sure you upload in the ABR file. It's the Adobe Brush format. Okay, click Open, and it's going to come up with this. So it's going to show you things. It's going to pretty much automatically recognize their brushes. You don't have to put an optional prefix. That's absolutely fine because it's going to import straight to brushes. If you want to keep them organized and you've got set brushes, you can set an optional prefix or path. So you can go, I don't know, you can put Fenris brushes if it's this one, or Photoshop original brushes or anything like that. You can do all that stuff. That's absolutely fine. When you go to import, make sure you import your resources to Shelf. Current session will get rid of them as soon as you close the program. Project will only save them to the project. Shelf resources means they stay on the computer, basically. So Shelf resources, import. It's going to work its magic and import all your brushes. So now you actually have some brushes. So they work like the brushes in Photoshop, and you'll have all the tweakable stuff like in Photoshop as well. So that's always a good start. The interface itself is relatively straightforward. This is your shelf. Your shelf basically is where all of your things are stored. So you've got your brushes, your textures. These are just some ones I downloaded and was testing around with before. You've got materials, smart materials. You can download loads more from Substance Share. We'll probably end up going through that maybe tomorrow or next week just so I can show you how smart materials work. But for now, I want you guys just to try and get used to painting stuff in 3D. You've got your tools, you've got your paint, your arrays, you've got projection, which allows you to import a texture, whether that be, a logo or something like that. So maybe you've got, I don't know, maybe you're working on a fighter plane and you want to just import loads of logos. You can paint them straight on. You can paint them on the model directly. You can paint them on the UVs. You just go into here. You can set base color or you can set a material. It doesn't really matter. I'd say go with, if you're going to do that sort of stuff, obviously set it as a base color. Set everything else you need. Okay. This is polygon selector mold, so you can actually paint via specific polygons. So once you've got a material selected, you can do that. Smudge tool, clone tool, they're your basic Photoshop standard smudge and clone tools. I'm going to stick with brush for now. So this is your texture set list. Your texture set list is basically what your materials are. So if I just start turning these off, they're called Material 2 and Material 14 because whoever made the model decided to call them Material 2 and Material 14. When you click on them, you'll see the UV here changes. So this is the model, the entire model. If I turn off Material 14, you'll see I've just got the axe head. It's the only one that's showing. If I'm trying to paint on this, you know, because I've got material 14, which is the handle selected, it will not let me paint on the head no matter what I do. Okay? So you have to be careful. Make sure you're painting on the right layer, make sure you paint on the right thing. What I would suggest is you just double click on it and change the name. So we know this is the handle. And obviously tab, if you want to swap between your views, you can do that. Don't just use it to try and go up and down. We'll call that axe itself. Cool. So when you first import a model, you're going to see it's quite plain looking. It's not going to have any of your details on it. What we need to do is we need to do a thing called baking, or we need to bake the maps in. Now, you may have heard of that term before, but for this, it's a little bit different. Okay. So first thing we want to do is you want to go to texture settings. Make sure everything's set correctly. So make sure that you know document size is correct. You're on the right thing. All the maps you want to use. I don't really want to use height, so I'm just getting rid of that. If you want to add different maps in, maybe you want to use, I don't know, glowy textures, you click on the little plus button and you can add in whatever you want, whether that be an emissive or a gloss or a displacement. You can add all that in here and that'll combine it to your maps, so it'll show up later on. Normal mixing, you can change this at any point. I'm going to say stick with combine for now because I'm going to show you a way that will allow you to paint over stuff later. UV padding, 3D space neighbors, absolutely fine. And then we go to bake mesh maps. Now what this is going to do, selection, right? So we're going to select what we want. So make sure both of your objects are selected. So maps common. So output size. What this is going to do is it's going to let you pick the size of the maps you want to bake. We're going to go for 2K just because that's the size of our document, and we're not going to be using these maps in any other context. They're just going to be used in Substance. We don't need to have them super massively high. You can actually bake low, so if you've got a low poly and a high poly model, you can actually bring the high poly model in and then bake the normals down from that. Because we don't have that, we don't have to worry. We can go over that later if people are stuck with that. But for now, we're going to be painting all our normals inside the Substance Painter. All the other settings should be fine. If you do have any issues, you can just come in and tweak it and rebake them. It's absolutely fine. Anti-alias, I'd say subsampling 2x2 just makes it less pixelated. Your low height, you can ignore all this for now. Normal baking parameters you can ignore for now. And then you want to make sure that your normal, your world space normal, your ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, position, and thickness are all saved. Thickness you don't really need unless you're doing stuff like glass or things that are translucent or stuff like skin. And an ID map we don't really need because we've not set ID maps in Maya. If you have set up an ID map in Maya, then bring it in, it will import it. But for now, don't have to worry about it. So once you've done all that, we click on Save Settings, Bake Maps again. It'll save them all anyway. Bake selected textures. And you're going to see Substance Painter go through its whole shtick of trying to work out everything. And now it's going to automatically apply everything. So what it's done is it's worked out all of the maps we need. What this allows us to do, basically, if you come back into your texture set settings, which we're going to scroll down here, you're going to see it's going to have a normal, a world space, an ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, position, and thickness. It's worked it all out. So what the thickness map does is it tells you how thick a part of the material is. So obviously, if we look at the model from this bit here is a lot thicker this way than there. So if you're making this out of human skin, you want it to be slightly translucent, it's going to be less clear here. So that's all it does. It just really intelligently bakes all the maps for you that you'll need for using Substance to most of your ability. So now we've done all that, we've done all the bits that are kind of the nitty-gritty boring bits. What we're going to do is we're going to look at how to actually get textures on our models. So I'm going to start with the axe handle. This is your layers tab. Exactly the same as Photoshop, it's the layers tab. Basically, you'll always have a base material. You can bin this if you want, but then you have to add in a new one, so I'm just going to undo that. Okay? The primary feature of Substance is you're going to want to use a lot of masks. We've gone over this in Photoshop a little bit, but what masks will help you here is they will make it a lot easier for you to blend materials rather than erasing stuff. Just using masks means that you're working in a form of non-destructive, like, artistry. Basically, you can go back and undo your mistakes rather than having to undo all the time. You can go back and paint out your mistakes. Okay? This is your paint properties. So this is where everything is. So your brush size, your minimum size. So you can say, oh, well, I want my brush to have a set limit, regardless of pen pressure or whatever. You've got flow, just like in Photoshop, means how thick whatever you're painting is coming out. Stroke opacity, so how translucent something is. Spacing means you can actually draw dots, so you can paint along an object and it won't actually draw a straight line, it'll space it out. Set the spacing to, I think 5 is the minimum, but it will basically means they're overlapping anyway. You can change the angle, so if you've got a shape brush, you can change the angle of the brush. Jitter stuff, so size jitter means it'll change how different the actual size is, so per stroke it will change how big it is. Flow jitter means that it will change just how much is coming out at the time, so it will give you a little bit of uniqueness. Angle jitter, if you've got stuff that's shaped, it will actually, you know, rotate it every time you change it, and then position will also move stuff out of place, so you can go in and create speckled effects and stuff like that. So you don't have to actually go in and manually paint them in, you can do it like that. Alignment, so you can tangent wrap, so it's going to wrap around the object, or you can go tangent planar. What that means is it's going to stay flat, or it's going to try and stay flat as much as it can. Camera, so it's only going to stay towards where the camera is. So no matter what I do, you know, it's not wrapping around the object. If I paint there, it's painted from that angle. And UV, so it's only going to paint against the UV itself. Okay? So there's a couple of ways. I normally stick with tangent wraps, a little bit easier. Backface culling, what that means is it allows you to not paint on the backside of something. So if I turn that off, notice how it's painting on both sides. Turn it on, it's not. So if you're really trying to make sure that your model isn't getting painted on both sides, you can turn that off. Size space, you can have it so it's set to the object. That's really, don't need to bother about that. Alpha is what your brush actually looks like. I've just got the standard round brush at the minute, which is absolutely fine. Hardness, so if you want it really nice and soft around the edges, or if you want it to be a perfectly hard dot, you can change that. Stencil, you can tile it. There's all sorts of stuff with that. We're not going to get into that too much today because that's kind of a bit advanced. Materials, this allows you to change what's being affected. So, for example, I only want to affect, I don't know, the metalness. I'm going to set my metalness to 100%. It's only going to paint on how metallic my current layer is. Okay? So I can then go back in. I can maybe paint this as plastic. It will go back and paint that as a plastic. Or if I turn metalness off and I only want to paint the color, I can paint it red. It's only going to paint the color channel. If I then go in and paint it as red metal, see how it's affecting two different things? It's, you know, you can do a lot with this. And you don't have to do all of it manually either. You can paint in the normal, you can paint all sorts of stuff in. So that's the basic sort of layout of Painter. That's all you kind of need for now. We'll be getting into more advanced stuff later on once people are a bit more comfortable with it. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to stick to our guns, and we're going to stick with we're going to show you how to use the materials and then paint masks. Okay. So for now, we're going to paint the axe handle, or the head rather, the axe itself. So let's find a material that will work really well with this. I think let's try ship hull. Does that want to work? Do you want to go in there? There's a material. Okay, that material clearly doesn't want to work, which is fine. Sometimes you will have that. Sometimes materials just don't want to work. You might be that there's a setting option in there that it just doesn't want to work with. So I kind of like that, but it's kind of a bit too flat. So I'm just going to bin that. Let's go for aluminium. You going to want to work? Aluminium scratched. Okay, so I'm going to stick with the ones that've got a little dot in the corner. They seem to work fine. Okay. Damascus, let's go. Yeah, that'll do. Okay. So we've got this. So this is our base material. So we're going to say this is our base. I'm just going to get rid of this background layer for now. So we've got this Damascus. Now, because this is a pre-made material, it will have some options. The problem we've got is if we look at places like where the top here meets the side, it's kind of showing that there's a big, massive seam there. It's bound to happen with unwrapping. It just happens. So what you can do, you can change how this works. You can go to UV projection, which means it's going to take the whole material and it's going to try and just put it over the entire UV. You can shrink it down. You can adjust how it works. Kind of like this. It will automatically tile if you do this. You can actually say, actually, I want to have this part of the material go directly here. just going to undo that. Or you can scale it, so you can just say I'm going to have it 4 times scale. It's going to scale it like that. Stick with 1 for now. It's alright. It's doing its job. Let's go with 2, just a little bit nicer. Cool. We've still got this problem though. We've still got this big massive seam here where the textures don't line up properly. If we show you on base color, you'll see what I mean. By the way, you can change what view mode you're seeing. So you can see just the metallic map, just the roughness, just the normals, just the material itself. Okay? So if we go back to our properties here, there's a thing here which allows you to change how the texture is actually projected over the material. What we're going to do is we're going to go for tri-plane. And what this means is it's going to look at all 3 directions and it's going to try and make the best sort of match it can. So now we have slightly better. You know, some of it works, some of it doesn't, but that's bound to happen. We can change its rotation so it's a little bit more, you know, it's trying its best. Obviously it can't fix everything. We'll try planar again. See if it's going to work. You can offset it. You can change the rotation on a per angle basis. It's really a case of trying to fix something. Obviously, the model itself's not the best, so it's really difficult for it to try and work itself. But it's fine because we can paint over stuff like this anyway. I'm going to show you how. So you notice how it's just come up with a thing saying, "Ooh, you need a paint layer." Okay. So I'm going to go back. So we now have this Damascus as like our base layer. I can go in and change the material properties if I want. So I can, I don't know, let's make the color, let's make it maybe more of a grey. And it changes the whole material. We can come in and change the Damascus pattern because it's got a couple different ones. So maybe find one that works better for you. You can randomize it as well. Some of these materials do have randomization options. So if they were built in Substance Designer, there's an option there that might allow you to change the way the patterns are. You can change how rough the material is, or we can make it super rough, super shiny. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to go for something that's a little bit shinier, like that. Then you've got some other things you can change, how saturated the colour is, how intense the normals are. You can turn them on or off. You can do a couple of things. So when I was open before about the normal format, you can change it here on a material basis. So DirectX or OpenGL just changes how the model actually works at the normal map. Sometimes it doesn't even matter. Sometimes it doesn't need to do anything. Sometimes it will though. So if you end up with a material that doesn't look quite right, just try changing the normal format. So we've got that. So we've got our Damascus, which is, you know, it's looking okay. It's not looking too bad. Go back to tri-plane and just see if it recalculates it. So it's a little bit better. There's some options, there's some areas like here where it's not worked out quite as well, but that's absolutely fine. We can cover that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add a new layer. So we're going to add some rust over the top of it. When you're thinking about materials inside Substance, you want to kind of work around how your model is in real life. So you've got metals at base and then rust's over the top of that. Okay, so we want to add the rust on. I think there was a rust material already here, so we're going to add that over the top. Come on, don't be a dick. Am I going to have to change how normals are calculated? Let's go for this. Pop over the top. So notice how it's just plopped over the top, right? It's still showing a lot of the Damascus underneath, but it's just gone over the top, right? Doesn't really help at all because, you know, now it kind of looks like, well, there's rust, but there's shiny bits, and they're the complete polar opposites of each other. So what we want to do is we want to go in, just change that to tri-planar super quick, so it's, you know, trying to work out the rust normally. If you have this property where you've got something underneath that's like really quite intense, and you want it to, the rust to overlay at the top of it, there's a couple of things we can do. Here is your options. So you've got base color, metallic, roughness, and normal, right? If we go to base, go to normal, you can click on replace for base color. We can go to metallic and we can go to replace. We can go to roughness and replace it. And we can go to normal and we can replace it. And what that's going to do is it's going to replace everything over the top of it, okay? So it was just that normal that was poking through. So if we go back and we go to our base color, Normal. It's not really doing anything, which is fine. Just going to replace. So we've now got this model over the top. Now we're going to come in and change our settings for this. So maybe spread the rust amount. Maybe make the variations slightly more. You can have it very flat or very, very shiny. Rust amount. Let's go for full coverage, just so we can paint it in. Wetness allows you to change how sort of shiny the rust is. Roughness, and then paint itself. There's no paint on the top, which is fine. So you can change the rust color. You can randomize it. It's going to randomize everything. So you're not using the same generic thing over and over again. Now what we want to do, obviously we don't want to have worked on our material underneath and then have all this rust come over the top of it and spoil it. I'm going to right click on our layer and we're going to go to add a black mask. And it's going to disappear. That's because a black mask basically means that we're covering everything on that layer. And now what we're going to do is we'll come back in, we're going to paint in, so you're painting on the mask layer itself. So you're not painting the material in, what you're doing is you're revealing the material in the layer itself. You can add in a white mask if you want, so you can just replace or invert the mask and then paint in the stuff you don't want. It's absolutely fine. But we're going to change that to a black mask. So what we can now do is we can come in, we can paint our stuff over the top. Let's go back to our normals, because that was the one that was doing the most damage to us. Levels, close that. So we can come in and we can paint in our rust. And if we go a bit overboard, we don't have to worry, because we just have to swap. You can swap by just pressing X on the keyboard and it swaps the colour. If you notice when I'm pressing X, this orb here changes colour. Right, so black allows us to hide stuff, X allows us to paint stuff in. Again, we can go in and change how our brush works. We can make it really massive, but add subtle detail in. So, start painting little bits of it around here. So I'm going to try and cover all this normal here. So maybe, where the areas where it's going to be mostly affected, then come back, take some out, break it up a little bit. And even if you want to, I don't know, change some of the settings with the material itself, we can come back in and we can change them. So we want it to apply the normal, or I can turn the normal off. We want it to apply a roughness and our metal color. We go back into our mask and we can go back in and paint that out. Or if we don't want it to affect the colour, maybe we want to, just have it only affect our normal metallic and roughness. You can turn that off. It's not really going to do a whole lot. It's not going to look really rusty, but we can do that. So you don't have to think, oh, I've done all this work and it's not working. It's not going to happen. Or, oh, I've made this material and I really like it, but oh, some settings are wrong. I've got to paint everything in. You don't have to. You can go back in and change stuff. Sometimes if you painting in height, it can kind of, if you're painting in specifically certain things, it doesn't really matter. So if we go back in, say, I don't know, we only wanted to paint in the normal, we can do that. So if we turn everything else off, it's only painting in the rusty material normals, or we can turn it off, paint on metal or roughness, color, normal. If I want to change the color, make it more orange, or even go for like the trippy sort of blue, we can do that. And then if I wanted to add maybe something over the top of it, I can do that as well, just paint it on another layer. So you can go in and paint this stuff, and you can just keep adding layers in. Now, what I would suggest is if you do have a material like this and you want to paint over the top of it, you right click on the layer and go to add paint layer, or add paint. What this allows you to do is it allows you to paint on the specific channel, so it's only going to affect the layer we've just done. It's not going to affect everything, it's only going to affect this layer. So if you're wanting to make subtle changes, so maybe, I don't know, I want to turn the hardness down. Let's say I just want to affect the colour, so I want to make it orange leading into the grey or the green. This is going to help just do that. Can go back in with my blue later. slightly. Again, it's all about just trying stuff, painting stuff in. So notice how I've got this one, I think my alpha itself. We don't want to use sheer pull, we want to use the rusted material. So I'm going in like this, maybe fade it out a little bit more. Change the flow, go back, undo it. So notice how even if I'm drawing on the other parts of the model, it's only affected my paint layer itself. So the layer I've actually been working on, it's not going to go in and affect everything else. Okay. So that is why these layers are important, because it is like Photoshop. It is layering systems. You don't have to go in and paint over everything else. If you wanted to make this material and then paint another layer over the top, you absolutely could. You could go in and we'll just get rid of that paint layer. It's gone. Okay. Or if I undo, you can. I think you can just turn it off and on. Don't have to worry. We can just add another paint layer. So I'm just going to click on this. No, not that one. Not that one. Let's grab that painted material again. Pop it over the top. I'm going to add a black mask. We're just going to paint in bits around here. So now it's affecting everything. It's not just affecting the layer we were previously working on. It is affecting the other layers as well. So we're going to make the flow a little bit more. And again, make sure your material settings are set to what you want them to be. So if we go back to the material itself, you've got to make sure you aren't clicking on the mask and the material if something's missing. Let's go for old rusty container, or even let's go for old rusty container. Variation, we're going to turn that down. Rust amount, we're going to turn that up. Rust spread, turn that up a little bit. And then we're going to make sure it's only affecting our, well, make sure it's affecting everything really. Go to our black mask, zoom in, paint that stuff in. Again, once you've done all this as well, you can go back and change how much it's affecting things. So you can go into your channels, you can say how much, you know, what materials you want it to affect. Technical parameters, so you can change all the other stuff. So I think normal intensity means we can just turn this down. So look how, if you notice, it's very subtle, but it allows us to change how much the normals are affecting. And you can even go in here, like in Photoshop, you can change just how much the layers of opacity is happening, so you can make sure it's, you know, that's the just how much it's actually wanting to work. So the normals now 0% or 100%. Turn the normal intensity up a little bit, and we can just go turn that down. Go to your base color. We can change just how opaque that normal color is, so we can blend it in. Change the blending mode. You can change it to multiply. You can change it to overlay. So it's going to add color to the top. Okay. And again, changing whichever one it is, so changing your metallic or your base color or your normal doesn't affect the other map. So look how my normal is set to 89%. It was 89% of the level of like how much we want. If we go back to our base color, it's 100, and it's not changed it. So you've got to think of it as like multi-tier Photoshop, which is why I want you guys to have a go with this now, rather than using your own models and getting really confused and then crying. Okay. So for now, we're gonna say that's fine, or say, I don't know, we'll add one more in. So we'll add new paint layer. I'm just gonna draw. Let's have a look what map do I want to include. If we go to, I want it to only affect color. I want it to affect, if we come in here, we add in a height map, and we add in a, I don't know, emissive, right? So it's going to now go and add them maps to the other channels. You can go back and turn them off. It's absolutely fine. Okay, it's not a massive issue. Your height map will basically be baked down onto your normals anyway. I'm pretty sure it bakes down onto your normals because we don't typically use height maps in games. It's just, it helps push the normal detail out a little bit more. So I'd say for now, just stick with your normals. Experiment with the height stuff if you want. Just don't rely on it to do a lot of your work. So we'll go to here. I'm just going to add, I don't know, I'm going to draw in a... Let's go for this material. No, we're not even going to go for that. We're going to make our own. Change the colour. I don't know. We're going to draw something in. We're going to make the flow 100%. We're going to set our... We only want to affect colour, height, and emissive. We can then come back over here. Channels. So they're all there. It's fine. Technical parameters is fine. Now, this is just a basic material setup, okay? It's not letting us change anything at the minute because we're still using this rust, I'm pretty sure, as a base material. If we add a paint layer, so add paint, it should allow us to actually come in and change everything. Attributes. Get rid of that. There you go. So if you end up with material stuff that doesn't really look like it's going to work, just come in and make sure that it's not using different material mode, okay? So we want to make our colour. We're going to make it... Let's go for a bright blue. Let's go for this blue here. We're going to set our metallic... Well, we don't want it to affect our metallic. We don't want it to affect our roughness or our normal. So height. Height allows you to paint stuff on. So it's going to let me paint that in. It's absolutely fine. Actually, we're not going to let it affect our normal. We want to make it a bit flat. Our normal's going to be completely flat. Height. So what I do is if I paint the height in, it's going to push it out. Okay, it's going to look like it's pushing out, or it's going to look like it's going to push in. Okay. On normal for this map, we want it to completely replace. We'll go to base color again, so paint. Ooh, it's saving. So maybe I want to, I don't know, have that. Right, that's the material I'm going for, or even. I don't know, because it's a Viking axe, we're just going to put some scribbles on it. There we go. Okay, we're going to set our emissive colour. So at the minute it's set to black, which means it's not emissive. We can set this to whatever we want. That should be fine. May not show in here what it's doing, but I think there's a way of changing the viewport settings to show the emissive. Again, you probably won't be using emissive for this, so it's absolutely fine. And then we're going to go to our emissive, replace, normal, replace. So our normal should be completely flat. If we turn our normal off, it's not really doing a whole lot. Yeah, that's fine. So, say that was our axe, right? That's what we're after. We're like, yeah, it's 100% what we're after. That's fine. What we now need to do is we're going to go paint the handle in. Now the handle, again, we're just going to go for something real easy. Let's go for, drop in just this, I don't know, let's find a wood material, parquet. Let's go for that. Right, got this wood material. It'll do, except for this massive seam down the middle. UV, triplanar. So now we're going to try and match it up down the middle. That's pretty good. The problem is I'm not liking that it's all wood. I kind of want some leather on there. We can fix that. What we're going to do is we're going to go for some plain leather. We're going to pop that over the top. Add a black mask over the top of it. And then what we can do is we can go, right, we want our normal to affect, replace it. We can come in, we can paint in our material. We're going to make sure that's 100% fine. And we're going to set the opacity to, where is it? Flow to 100%. Hardness is what we're after. We'll set the hardness a little bit higher. So we can come in and we can just paint in the bits we want leather. So you can go around the model, paint in the bits you want leather. Maybe change the spacing, because the spacing seems a little too far. And again, you can paint this on the model, or you can paint this on the UVs itself, doesn't really matter. It will paint on both regardless. So now we've got this sort of leather here, which is absolutely what we're after. But we want to kind of add in the stripes there. So we've got that. So now we've got this material. We want to go back to our leather material. Go to height. Let us actually change the height. Parameters, basics. height range, height position. Should let us push that out. So notice how it's looking a little bit more pushed out. Let's paint. Whoop. There we go. We can come in, we can adjust just how much we want of it. We can even go in. We can go in and deepen these grooves here. So if we go in here, we add a paint layer. We only want it to affect our heights. We turn everything else off. We set the height to really low. We come in. You know, we can come in and make our grooves deeper. Obviously, you guys will spend a little bit more time painting this in. I'm just trying to show you at the minute how it would work. So let's go and come in. We can paint scratches. We can paint all sorts in. If we want to come back, we want to change, okay, our normal. Let's go to a normal layer. Let's make that maybe replace a little bit more, just so we're not getting as much of it. And then we can come in, go back to our paint layer, paint in the height itself. So that's it. That's the basics of it, is how to come in and paint stuff. And then if you want to check how it looks, you can just go to viewport, I think, or is it window? It's one of the two. Oh, mode it is. They've changed it. It used to be in window. So you've got painting and you've got rendering. So rendering, what it's going to do is it's going to show you kind of what it looks like in Unreal Engine. There is actually a mode in, or there's a thing on the website, which is Substance Share, which allows you to download a display setting that basically shows you Unreal's default camera like settings. And notice how we can have a look and see, okay, is this what we want? Shader settings, emissive intensity, we can turn that all the way up. You know, is it going to glow, is it not? And if you're like, yeah, that looks cool, you can just press F9, it'll take you back to the mode here. Okay? So that's everything I want to cover today. We're going to look at exporting stuff next week, so I want you guys just to have a play around with the model I'm going to give you, just to see if you guys, you know, can get the grips of this or not. What I will also go through tomorrow is I will go through like tiling textures inside of Maya, just as a side note, because you will not be wanting to texture the walls in something like Substance. That's a Photoshop job, purely because you can make the materials, but putting a room in here and then trying to export them textures out is going to be a big ask. Okay, so what you'd want to do is you'd want to create like a high quality texture in maybe Photoshop or something else, and then go and tile that inside of Maya. In a game engine, it's just the same way. You can do it in Unreal as well. You'd create this high quality texture and then you'd overlay it with other things. So you could create like a grunge map or something that would work. But the only problem would be is trying to get it to work. And rooms typically have not very much in the way of like a lot of big differences. Like anything like, especially in Unreal, when we get into Unreal, stuff like cracks in walls, or when you're making wallpaper with like grime and dirt on it, you would overlay stuff over the top of it. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording there and I'm going to upload this to the classroom. Where are you?